My son texted, Easter brunch is cancelled. The restaurant double booked. But when I went there, my name is Margaret Thompson. I'm 52 years old, and I'm sitting here in my empty kitchen on Easter Sunday morning, staring at a text message that just destroyed everything I thought I knew about my family. The message from my son David reads, Hey Mom, sorry but Easter brunch is cancelled. The restaurant double booked and there's nothing they can do. Maybe next year. I've been hosting Easter brunch for my family for over 20 years, but this year David insisted on taking over. Let me treat the family for once, Mom, he'd said with that charming smile that reminded me so much of his father. You've done enough. At first, I was touched by his gesture, proud that my 28-year-old son wanted to step up and take care of the family. But now, holding this text in my trembling hands, I feel something cold settling in my stomach. If you're watching this story unfold, please hit that like button and subscribe, because what I'm about to tell you will make you question everything you think you know about family loyalty. The Thompson family dynamic has always been complicated. My late husband, Robert, built our family around traditional values and strict hierarchies. He passed away 3 years ago from a sudden heart attack, leaving me with our children, David, who works in finance, and our daughter, Sarah, who's a teacher. After Robert's death, David naturally assumed the role of man of the house, though I never asked him to. Robert had very specific ideas about family roles. Women were nurturers and homemakers, men were providers and decision-makers. Even in death, his influence permeated our family structure. David inherited not just his father's strong jawline and commanding presence, but also his belief that he knew what was best for everyone, especially the women in his life. Growing up, I had learned to navigate around Robert's moods and expectations. He wasn't cruel, but he was controlling in subtle ways. He'd make financial decisions without consulting me, plan family vacations to places only he wanted to go, and had this way of making me feel grateful for his generosity, even when it meant I had to sacrifice my own preferences. When he chose our house, our cars, our social circle, I convinced myself it was because he cared about our family's image and security. After Robert died, I thought I might finally have some freedom to make my own choices. But David stepped seamlessly into his father's shoes, offering to help with finances, suggesting I didn't really need to work full-time anymore, and gradually taking over decisions I was perfectly capable of making myself. When I wanted to redecorate the living room, he gently suggested I wait. When I mentioned possibly taking a cooking class, he reminded me how perfect my cooking already was. Why change anything? Sarah, bless her heart, tried to support me, but she had her own battles with David. He'd constantly question her teaching career, suggesting she'd be happier in a more stable profession like nursing or administration. When she started dating Marcus, a freelance graphic designer, David made subtle comments about Marcus's unreliable income and lack of ambition. The family dinners became tense affairs where David would dominate conversations, offering unsolicited advice about everyone's life choices. This Easter brunch was supposed to be different. David had been so enthusiastic about it, insisting on handling every detail. I found this amazing place, Mom, the Riverside Garden Restaurant. They have a fantastic reputation, and I want to show you and Sarah how much I appreciate everything you've done for our family. He'd booked it 6 weeks in advance, sent detailed invitations to extended family, and even arranged for flowers to be delivered to our table. I remember feeling a warm surge of pride. Maybe David was finally growing into the kind of man who could lead with kindness rather than control. Maybe he was learning to value collaboration over domination. The way he talked about this brunch, it felt like he genuinely wanted to honor me and Sarah. to create a beautiful memory for our family. But families like ours don't change overnight. Years of ingrained patterns don't simply disappear because someone books a restaurant reservation. The seeds of manipulation that Robert planted and David inherited run deeper than gestures and good intentions. They're embedded in the very foundation of how we communicate, how we make decisions, and how we define love and respect within our family structure. Looking back now, I should have noticed the warning signs. David had been unusually secretive about the restaurant details, deflecting my questions about the menu or dress code with vague answers like, "Don't worry about it. I've got everything handled." When I offered to bring my famous Easter cookies or help with decorations, he insisted it wasn't necessary. "This is my treat, Mom. Just show up and enjoy yourself." At the time, I interpreted this as thoughtfulness, but now I'm wondering if there was something else behind his insistence on complete control. The morning started normally enough. I woke up early, as I always do on holidays, that familiar mix of excitement and anxiety that comes with family gatherings. I spent extra time choosing my outfit, a soft lavender dress that Sarah had given me for my birthday, paired with the pearl necklace Robert had bought me for our anniversary years ago. I wanted to look elegant for David's special brunch, to show him how much I appreciated his gesture. I was putting on my lipstick when the text arrived at 9:47 a.m. The restaurant reservation was for 11:30 a.m., which meant I should have been leaving the house in about 30 minutes. The timing of his message felt strange. Why would a restaurant wait until the morning of Easter to inform customers about a double booking? Wouldn't they have known about such a significant scheduling conflict days or even weeks in advance? But here's what really bothers me about this text message, and maybe you'll understand why I'm feeling so unsettled. David is meticulous about planning. He's the type of person who calls restaurants to confirm reservations, who reads reviews obsessively, who always has backup plans. In his work at the financial firm, he's known for his attention to detail and contingency planning. The idea that he would simply accept a restaurant's last-minute cancellation without fighting for alternative solutions or at least calling to warn me earlier doesn't align with the David I know. Something doesn't add up, and that cold feeling in my stomach is growing stronger by the minute. I'm standing in my bedroom, still holding my phone, when something Robert used to say echoes in my mind. Trust, but verify. He'd say it about business deals, about contractors, about anything important. Maybe it's time I applied that principle to my own family. The more I think about David's text, the more questions arise. Why didn't he call? Why didn't he suggest an alternative plan? And most importantly, why do I feel like I'm being dismissed rather than informed? Against my better judgment, or maybe because of it, I decide to drive to the Riverside Garden restaurant myself. If there really was a double booking situation, I want to see it with my own eyes. Maybe I can even help David salvage the situation. After all, Easter only comes once a year, and our extended family members have already made plans to join us. Aunt Patricia is driving down from Albany, and my cousin James is bringing his new girlfriend to meet the family. Surely there must be something we can do. The drive to the restaurant takes about 25 minutes through the winding roads of our Connecticut suburb. Spring has arrived in full force, with dogwood trees blooming white and pink along the roadside, daffodils pushing up through the still cool earth, and that particular quality of light that makes everything look like a promise. It's the kind of day that should be filled with family laughter, children hunting for Easter eggs, and the comfortable chaos of loved ones gathered around a table. Instead, I'm driving alone, my stomach churning with questions I don't want to ask and answers I'm afraid to discover. The radio is playing soft jazz, but I can barely hear it over the sound of my own heartbeat. Every few minutes, I glance at my phone, hoping for another message from David, maybe explaining the situation better, maybe suggesting we move the celebration to someone's house, maybe just acknowledging how disappointing this must be for everyone. But my phone remains silent. The Riverside Garden restaurant sits nestled beside a small creek, its Tudor-style architecture giving it an old-world charm that makes it popular for special occasions. The parking lot is full, which immediately strikes me as odd if they're dealing with a double booking crisis that's forcing them to cancel reservations. Luxury cars and family SUVs are parked in neat rows, and I can see people in Easter finery walking toward the entrance, their faces bright with holiday anticipation. I park my car and sit for a moment, watching the steady stream of well-dressed families entering the restaurant. Women in pastel dresses, men in crisp blazers, children in their Sunday best clutching stuffed bunnies and chocolate eggs. Everyone looks happy, excited, completely unaware of any booking catastrophe. The restaurant's windows glow warmly, and I can see the shadows of people inside, the movement that suggests busy servers and satisfied diners. My hands are shaking slightly as I get out of the car. Part of me wants to turn around and drive home, to accept David's explanation and try to salvage Easter Sunday with a simple family dinner at my house. But there's another part of me, a part that's been growing stronger since Robert's death, that needs to know the truth. I've spent too many years accepting explanations that didn't quite make sense, trusting decisions that were made without my input, believing that my instincts were wrong when they told me something wasn't right. The restaurant's entrance is adorned with elegant Easter decorations, spring flowers in crystal vases, pastel ribbons tied around the door handles, and a small sign welcoming guests to their Easter celebration brunch. A young hostess with a bright smile greets me as I enter, her voice cheerful and professional. "Good morning. Welcome to Riverside Garden. Do you have a reservation with us today?" I take a deep breath, my heart pounding so loudly I'm sure she can hear it. "Yes, I believe so. The reservation would be under Thompson, David Thompson, for 11:30. She checks her tablet, scrolling through what appears to be a long list of names. The restaurant buzzes with activity around us. Servers carrying trays of mimosas and coffee, families settling into booths and tables, the gentle chatter of people enjoying a special occasion. Everything looks perfectly normal, perfectly organized, perfectly operational. "Oh yes, here it is," the hostess says, looking back up at me with that same bright smile. "Thompson party of 8, 11, 30. You're actually a little early, but that's perfectly fine. We have your table ready if you'd like to be seated now, or you can wait in our lounge area for the rest of your party to arrive." The words hit me like a physical blow. The reservation exists. The table is ready. There is no double booking. There is no crisis. There is no reason why Easter brunch should be canceled. I stand there for a long moment, trying to process what this means. The hostess is looking at me with growing concern, probably wondering why I look like I've seen a ghost instead of appearing pleased that my table is ready. Around us, the restaurant continues its normal Sunday rhythm, completely oblivious to the fact that my world has just shifted on its axis. "Ma'am, are you all right? Would you like to be seated or would you prefer to wait?" I realize I need to say something, but my mouth feels dry and my thoughts are racing. If the reservation is fine, if the restaurant is operating normally, if there is no double booking situation, then why did David text me to cancel? Why did he lie? And more importantly, what is he doing instead of having Easter brunch with his family? Could you give me just a moment? I need to make a quick phone call." "Of course. Take your time. I'll keep your table reserved." I walk back outside, my legs feeling unsteady. The spring air that seemed so promising 20 minutes ago now feels cold against my skin. I lean against my car and call David's number, my finger hovering over his contact before finally pressing it. The phone rings once, twice, 3 times, and then goes to voicemail. His recorded voice, confident and casual, invites me to leave a message. David, it's Mom. I'm at the restaurant. The Riverside Garden restaurant. They have our reservation. They say everything is fine. I don't understand what's happening. Could you please call me back as soon as you get this message? I hang up and immediately call Sarah. She answers on the second ring, her voice slightly breathless. Mom, what's wrong? David texted me about the brunch being canceled. I was just getting ready to call Aunt Patricia to let her know. Sarah, I'm at the restaurant. There's no double booking. Our reservation is perfectly fine. They're ready to seat us right now. There's a long silence on the other end of the line. I can hear Sarah's breathing, can almost feel her trying to process this information the same way I'm struggling to understand it. What do you mean there's no double booking? I mean the hostess just confirmed our reservation. Table for 8 at 11:30, just like David said he booked. The restaurant is busy and operating normally. There's no crisis here, Sarah. No reason to cancel anything. But why would David lie about that? That doesn't make any sense. And that's the question that's sending chills down my spine. Why would my son lie about Easter brunch being canceled? What could be so important that he would deceive his entire family on one of the most significant holidays of the year? And why am I standing in a restaurant parking lot on Easter Sunday, realizing that I don't actually know my son as well as I thought I did? Sarah, I think we need to figure out what's really going on here. Sarah arrives at the restaurant 30 minutes later, her face pale and her usual composed demeanor visibly shaken. She's wearing the emerald green dress we picked out together last month, but her hands are trembling as she adjusts her purse strap. As she approaches me in the parking lot, I can see the same confusion and growing dread in her eyes that I've been feeling since I first spoke to the hostess. Mom, I've been trying to reach David, but his phone goes straight to voicemail. And I called Marcus, he was supposed to join us today too. And he said David texted him last night to cancel. Last night, Mom. Not this morning like he told us. The pieces of David's deception are starting to form a picture, but it's not one I want to see clearly. What did David's text to Marcus say exactly? Sarah pulls out her phone and scrolls through her messages. Marcus forwarded it to me. It says, Hey Marcus, sorry, but we need to cancel Easter brunch tomorrow. Family emergency came up, rain check, and look at the timestamp. 11:47 p.m. last night. So David had been planning to cancel our Easter brunch since late Saturday night, but he waited until Sunday morning to tell me and Sarah. He gave us just over an hour's notice, not enough time to make alternative plans or even properly notify our extended family, but he gave Marcus nearly 12 hours warning. Why the difference? What was David trying to prevent? Sarah, do you think Marcus would mind if we asked him to meet us here? I have a feeling we're going to need all the perspective we can get to figure this out. I already asked him to come. He should be here any minute. He's as confused as we are about all this. We walked back into the restaurant together, and I explained the situation to the hostess. She's sympathetic and accommodating, offering to hold our table for another hour while we try to reach the rest of our party. The irony isn't lost on me. The restaurant staff is more helpful and understanding about our family situation than my own son has been. Marcus arrives just as we're settling into our booth, his usually cheerful expression replaced by concern. He's a gentle man in his early 30s, with kind eyes and an artist's attention to detail that I've always appreciated. More importantly, he loves Sarah in a way that reminds me how respect and care should look in a relationship. As he slides into the booth next to Sarah, I notice how naturally they fit together, how he immediately reaches for her hand when he sees how upset she is. Mrs. Thompson, I have to say, this whole thing has been bothering me since last night. David's text just felt off somehow. And when Sarah called this morning to say the restaurant had supposedly double booked, I knew something wasn't right. I've worked with restaurants on event planning for my design clients, and they don't operate that way. They would have called days ago if there was a scheduling conflict. Marcus's professional insight confirms what my instincts have been telling me, but I need to understand the bigger picture. Marcus, in your interactions with David, have you ever noticed anything unusual about how he communicates? Any patterns that might help us understand what's happening here? He exchanges a look with Sarah, and I can see some kind of silent communication pass between them. There's something they know, something they've been discussing between themselves but haven't shared with me. Mom, Sarah says carefully, there are some things about David that Marcus and I have been concerned about for a while. We didn't want to worry you, especially since you've been doing so well since Dad died, but what, Sarah? Please, just tell me. After everything that's happened this morning, I think I can handle whatever you need to say. Marcus leans forward, his voice gentle but serious. Mrs. Thompson, has David ever mentioned anything to you about Sarah and me getting engaged? The question catches me completely off guard. Engaged? No, he's never. Are you two? Sarah's cheeks turn pink, but her smile is radiant. We've been talking about it, Mom. Marcus asked me a few weeks ago, and I said yes. We wanted to announce it today at Easter brunch to the whole family. It was going to be our big surprise. The joy I should be feeling at this news is immediately complicated by a growing realization. David knows about this? We told him last Tuesday, Marcus explains. We asked him to keep it quiet until today because we wanted to share the news with everyone at the same time. We thought it would make the Easter celebration even more special. Sarah takes my hand across the table. Mom, David's reaction was strange. He didn't congratulate us. He didn't seem happy at all. Instead, he started asking all these questions about our timeline, our financial situation, whether we'd really thought this through. He made it feel like we were making a mistake instead of sharing good news. The cold feeling in my stomach is spreading to my chest now. I'm starting to see the outline of something that makes me sick to think about. What kinds of questions specifically? He wanted to know if Marcus had enough savings for a proper wedding, whether I was sure I wanted to tie myself down so young, whether we'd considered how marriage might affect my teaching career, Sarah says, her voice growing smaller. But the thing that really bothered me was when he said, I just think you should be careful, Sarah. You've seen what marriage can do to women. Look at Mom. She gave up so much of herself for Dad. The words hit me like a slap, not because they're entirely untrue, but because of how David is using my marriage as a weapon against Sarah's happiness. Yes, I made sacrifices in my marriage to Robert. Yes, I sometimes lost myself in trying to be the wife he expected. But that doesn't mean all marriages are doomed to repeat those patterns, especially not Sarah's relationship with Marcus, which is built on equality and mutual respect in ways my marriage never was. He's trying to sabotage your engagement, I say quietly, the pieces finally clicking into place. He doesn't want you to get married, so he canceled Easter brunch to prevent you from making the announcement. Marcus nods grimly. That's what we started to suspect too. And Mrs. Thompson, there's something else. When David found out we were planning to announce our engagement today, he also found out that Sarah was going to ask you to be her maid of honor. He seemed particularly upset about that part. Why would he be upset about me being Sarah's maid of honor? Sarah's eyes fill with tears, but they're tears of anger rather than sadness. Because, Mom, I think David has some very specific ideas about what your life should look like as a widow. And those ideas don't include you being celebrated, being central to happy occasions, or being reminded that you deserve joy and love in your life. The truth of what Sarah is saying lands with devastating clarity. Since Robert's death, David has been subtly steering me toward a smaller life, a quieter existence, a version of widowhood that keeps me safely contained within the roles he approves of: the grieving mother, the grateful recipient of his guidance, the woman who should be thankful for his protection rather than seeking her own adventures. A wedding where I'm the maid of honor, where I'm celebrated and included and visible in my daughter's happiness, doesn't fit the narrative David has been constructing about my post-Robert life. It reminds everyone, including me, that I'm not just a mother and a widow, but a whole person deserving of love, joy, and central importance in my family's milestones. So he lied about the restaurant to prevent the announcement, I say, my voice getting stronger as my anger builds. He manipulated all of us, disappointed our extended family, and tried to ruin Easter to avoid a moment where Sarah would be celebrated and I would be honored. That's what we think, Marcus says. And Mrs. Thompson, I want you to know that Sarah and I would love to have you as our maid of honor. We can't imagine getting married without you standing with us. I look at these two young people who love each other, who want to build a life together, who thought enough of me to include me in their most important moment, and I feel something I haven't felt in years: righteous fury. Not the quiet resentment I sometimes harbored during my marriage, not the passive acceptance I've been practicing since Robert's death, but clean, powerful anger at the injustice of what David has done. We're going to have our Easter brunch, I announce, my voice carrying an authority I didn't know I still possessed. We're going to celebrate Sarah and Marcus's engagement. We're going to call Aunt Patricia and James and tell them to come anyway. And then we're going to figure out exactly what David thought he was going to accomplish with this deception. For the first time all morning, Sarah smiles her full, brilliant smile. I love you, Mom. I love you too, sweetheart, both of you. And I'm not going to let anyone, not even my own son, diminish your happiness or mine ever again. The transformation that occurs over the next 2 hours feels nothing short of miraculous. What started as a morning of confusion and betrayal slowly evolves into one of the most meaningful Easter celebrations I've ever experienced. As I watch Sarah call our extended family members to uncancel the brunch, her voice bright with excitement as she shares her engagement news, I realize that David's attempt to control our family narrative has actually backfired in the most beautiful way possible. Aunt Patricia arrives first, her silver hair perfectly styled and her eyes sparkling with curiosity about the family drama Sarah mentioned on the phone. At 67, Patricia has always been the rebel of our family, the aunt who traveled to Europe alone in the 1980s, who started her own catering business after her divorce, who never hesitated to speak her mind about family dynamics that others preferred to ignore. Margaret, darling, she says, embracing me with her signature lavender perfume and no-nonsense warmth. Sarah gave me the basics on the phone, but I want to hear the whole story, and more importantly, I want to hear about this engagement. Where's my future nephew-in-law? As Marcus stands to introduce himself, I'm struck by how naturally he fits into our family dynamic. There's none of the awkward positioning for dominance that often characterizes family gatherings. Instead, he listens genuinely to Patricia's stories about her latest art class, asks thoughtful questions about her catering business, and seamlessly includes Sarah in every conversation. Watching them together, I can see the partnership Sarah described, the mutual respect that David seems so threatened by. James arrives with his girlfriend Claire, a soft-spoken librarian who brings thoughtful questions and gentle humor to our table. As we settle into the rhythm of a real family meal, sharing stories, passing dishes, celebrating each other's news, I begin to understand what we would have lost if David's deception had succeeded. This isn't just about one cancelled brunch. It's about the pattern of diminishment that David has been orchestrating, the way he's been systematically reducing our family's capacity for joy, spontaneity, and mutual celebration. By lying about the restaurant, he wasn't just preventing Sarah's engagement announcement. He was ensuring that I would spend Easter Sunday alone, disappointed, and once again reminded of my dependence on his decisions. So let me understand this correctly, Patricia says, cutting into her eggs Benedict with characteristic precision. David lied about the restaurant booking to prevent Sarah from announcing her engagement, which would have made you the maid of honor, which would have been a moment of celebration and central importance for you as well as Sarah. That's our theory, I confirm, surprised by how clearly I can see the manipulation now that I'm discussing it openly. Patricia sets down her fork and fixes me with the same direct gaze that used to intimidate me when I was younger. Margaret, what does David gain by keeping you small? The question hangs in the air like a challenge. I've been so focused on understanding David's motivations that I haven't considered the benefits he derives from maintaining control over my life and choices. Control, Marcus says quietly. He gains control, and probably financial security too. All eyes turn to Marcus, and I can see Sarah nodding as if this isn't the first time they've discussed this aspect of David's behavior. Mrs. Thompson, forgive me if this is too personal, but after your husband passed away, how were his assets distributed? Did David inherit anything directly, or does he have any kind of financial stake in your well-being? The question makes me uncomfortable, partly because it feels invasive, but mostly because I'm realizing I don't actually know the full answer. Robert handled all our financial affairs during our marriage, and after his death, David stepped in to help me navigate the inheritance process. I signed papers, transferred accounts, and trusted David to guide me through decisions I felt unprepared to make alone. Robert left everything to me, I say slowly, but David has been helping me manage things. He's on several of my accounts as a co-signer in case something happens to me. He thought it would be easier, and I was so overwhelmed at the time. Patricia and Marcus exchange a look that makes my stomach clench. Even Claire, who barely knows our family, seems to recognize the implications of what I've just described. Mom, Sarah says gently, when was the last time you saw your actual financial statements? Not summaries or reports from David, but the real paperwork from your bank and investment accounts? I try to remember, but the past 3 years blur together in a haze of grief, adjustment, and gradual abdication of responsibility to David's helpful management. David handles all that. He gives me monthly updates and everything seems fine. I have access to my checking account for daily expenses, but not to your investment accounts, not to the life insurance money or the retirement funds. The realization hits me like a physical blow. I don't actually know how much money I have, where it's invested, or what David has been doing with the financial authority I gave him during my most vulnerable period. I've been living on an allowance from my own inheritance, trusting my son to manage assets I should be overseeing myself. Patricia, I say, my voice steadier than I feel, you mentioned you went through a divorce. Did you have to take back control of financial accounts that your ex-husband had been managing? Oh, honey, she says, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. It was the hardest thing I ever did, but also the most empowering. And I can help you figure out how to get a clear picture of your finances. But first, you need to understand that this isn't just about money. It's about autonomy. James, who has been quietly listening to this conversation, speaks up for the first time. Aunt Margaret, I work in estate planning, and what you're describing raises some red flags. Not necessarily criminal behavior, but definitely a concentration of control that isn't in your best interests. When someone has co-signer access to accounts and is making investment decisions on your behalf, there should be regular, detailed reporting and clear boundaries about what they can do without your explicit consent. The Easter brunch I thought was ruined is becoming a masterclass in family dynamics and financial independence. But more than that, it's becoming a moment of coalition building, of people who care about me offering concrete support and expertise to help me reclaim control over my own life. Here's what I think we should do, Sarah says, her teacher's organizational skills kicking into high gear. We finish this beautiful meal, we properly celebrate the engagement with toasts and stories, and then we make a plan for Mom to get a complete picture of her financial situation this week. And, Marcus adds, we need to decide how to handle David. He's going to realize eventually that Easter brunch happened without him, that his plan failed. How do we want to address the lying and manipulation? I take a deep breath, feeling stronger than I have in months. We tell him the truth. We tell him that we know what he did and why he did it. And we tell him that things are going to change. Patricia raises her mimosa glass with a mischievous smile. To Sarah and Marcus, to family celebrations that happen despite the best efforts of control freaks, and to Margaret finally taking her life back. As we toast, I feel something shift inside me. Not just anger at David's deception, but excitement about the possibilities that lie ahead. For the first time since Robert's death, I'm not waiting for someone else to make decisions about my life. I'm making them myself, surrounded by people who want to support my choices rather than limit them. The woman who drove to this restaurant this morning to check on a canceled brunch reservation was operating from fear, confusion, and inherited patterns of deferring to male authority. The woman finishing this Easter celebration is ready to take back her power, her money, and her right to be celebrated rather than managed. David's deception was meant to keep me small, but it's actually revealed how big my life could be when I stop accepting limitations that others place on my joy. By the time our Easter celebration winds down, I've made several important decisions. First, I'm going to my bank tomorrow morning to request complete statements for all accounts that have my name on them. Second, I'm calling an estate planning attorney to review the financial arrangements David convinced me to set up after Robert's death. And third, I'm going to David's apartment tonight to have the conversation that's been years in the making. Sarah offers to come with me, but I know this is something I need to do alone. David's manipulation has been enabled by my tendency to defer to his judgment, to trust his version of events even when my instincts told me something was wrong. If I'm going to reclaim my authority as his mother and as an independent adult, I need to confront him without anyone else speaking for me or supporting me. This conversation will establish whether our relationship can continue on new terms or whether David's need for control is incompatible with my need for autonomy. The drive to David's downtown apartment gives me time to organize my thoughts and prepare for what I know will be a difficult conversation. David lives in a sleek modern building that always makes me feel slightly out of place, all glass and steel and carefully curated minimalism. It's the kind of place that announces success and sophistication, qualities that David has cultivated carefully since college. I've always been proud of his ambition and achievements, but tonight, I'm wondering whether his success has come at the cost of his integrity. I text him that I'm coming up instead of calling from the lobby. If he's going to lie to me, I want to see his face when he does it. The elevator ride to the 15th floor feels interminable. my reflection in the polished steel doors showing a woman who looks older than her years, but more determined than she's been in decades. David opens his apartment door wearing casual clothes, jeans and a sweater that suggest he's been home all day. His expression when he sees me is a mixture of surprise and something else I can't quite identify. Guilt, maybe, or calculation. "Mom, what are you doing here? I thought the brunch was canceled." Even knowing what I know, hearing him continue the lie sends a fresh wave of anger through me. But I keep my voice calm and level. "May I come in, David? We need to talk." He steps aside to let me enter, and I notice that his apartment is immaculate as always, but there are signs that he's been entertaining someone. 2 wine glasses on the coffee table, both recently used. A second jacket draped over the back of his sofa. The faint scent of unfamiliar perfume in the air. "David, where were you supposed to be at 11:30 this morning?" "What do you mean?" "I told you. The restaurant canceled our brunch because of the double booking situation." I turned to face him directly, letting him see the full force of my disappointment and anger. "I went to the restaurant, David. The Riverside Garden restaurant. They had our reservation ready, table for 8, just like you booked. There was no double booking. There was no cancellation. There was no crisis. You lied to me. You lied to Sarah, and you lied to Marcus." For a moment, David's carefully composed expression falters. I see a flash of the boy he used to be, caught in a lie and scrambling for an explanation. But he recovers quickly, his features settling into the condescending expression I've come to recognize whenever he thinks I'm being unreasonable. "Mom, I think there's been some kind of miscommunication. Let me call the restaurant and sort this out." "David, stop. Just stop lying. I spoke to the hostess myself. Sarah and Marcus and I had Easter brunch there today. We celebrated Sarah's engagement and announced it to the family, exactly the way you tried to prevent. The mention of Sarah's engagement hits its target." David's face hardens, and for the first time I see him drop the pretense of concern and confusion. This is the face of a man who's been caught and is deciding whether to continue lying or shift to a different strategy. "So Sarah told you about the engagement," he says, his tone carefully neutral. "Yes, she did. And she told me about your reaction when they shared the news with you last week. She told me about your concerns about Marcus's financial stability, your warnings about marriage being bad for women, your suggestion that she should look at my marriage as a cautionary tale." David moves toward his kitchen, putting physical distance between us as he prepares for battle. "Mom, I was just trying to protect Sarah. She's my little sister and I want what's best for her. Marcus seems like a nice guy, but he's not stable. His income is unpredictable. He doesn't have a career trajectory, and Sarah deserves security." "Security like what, David? Security like I had with your father? A marriage where I had no input into financial decisions, no voice in major choices, no identity outside of being a wife and mother. Dad provided for us. He worked hard to give us a good life, to build something stable and secure. You never had to worry about money or making difficult decisions because he handled everything." The conversation is revealing more than David intends. His defense of Robert's controlling behavior shows me how deeply he's internalized the belief that women need to be protected from their own poor judgment, that love is expressed through limitations rather than empowerment. "David, do you think I'm capable of managing my own finances?" The question seems to catch him off guard. "Of course you are, Mom. But why should you have to worry about all that when I can handle it for you? You've been through enough with Dad's death. You should be able to focus on enjoying your retirement, not stressing about investment strategies and tax implications. And do you think Sarah is capable of choosing her own husband? That's different. Sarah is young and she's emotional. She might not see red flags that are obvious to someone with more experience. What red flags, specifically? David sighs, as if explaining this to me is exhausting. Mom, Marcus doesn't have a stable career. He's a freelance designer, which means his income varies dramatically from month to month. He doesn't have substantial savings, he doesn't own property, and he's never demonstrated the kind of long-term planning that a marriage requires. Sarah is a teacher. She needs someone who can provide security and stability, not someone who's going to create financial stress. I listened to David's analysis, hearing echoes of every conversation I had with Robert about practical considerations that somehow always resulted in him making decisions for both of us. The language of protection and wisdom masking a deep belief that women can be trusted to evaluate their own priorities and make their own choices. David, what if Sarah values kindness over income? What if she'd rather have a partner who treats her as an equal than someone who provides security while making all the decisions? What if she's learned from watching my marriage that financial stability isn't worth sacrificing personal autonomy? Mom, that's not fair. Dad loved you. He took care of our family. Yes, he did, in his way. But David, love that comes with the requirement to give up your own voice isn't really love. It's control disguised as care. And I'm afraid you've learned that pattern all too well. David's composure cracks completely. So now I'm the villain for caring about our family, for trying to protect the people I love from making mistakes that could hurt them, for wanting what's best for you and Sarah. No, David, you're not a villain for caring, but you crossed a line when you decided that your version of what's best was more important than our actual choices. You lied to us, manipulated us, and tried to sabotage a moment of celebration because it didn't fit your narrative about how our lives should unfold. The apartment falls silent, except for the hum of traffic 15 floors below. David stands in his kitchen, his hands gripping the granite countertop, his face a mask of frustration and something that might be genuine confusion. I think part of him truly believes he was protecting us, that his deception was justified by his good intentions. But good intentions don't excuse manipulation. Love that requires deception isn't really love at all. David, I need you to understand something. I'm not a fragile widow who needs your financial management. Sarah is not a naive girl who needs your relationship advice. We are adults who are capable of making our own decisions, even when those decisions don't align with your preferences. And what if you make wrong decisions? What if Sarah gets hurt? What if Marcus turns out to be irresponsible with money? Or what if you make an investment mistake that costs you your retirement security? Then those will be our mistakes to make and our consequences to live with. That's what autonomy means, David. It means having the right to be wrong, to learn from our own experiences, to choose our own priorities even when other people disagree with them. As I speak these words, I realize I'm not just confronting David about his behavior. I'm articulating principles I've never fully embraced in my own life, claiming an independence I've never actually exercised. For the first time, I'm demanding the right to make my own choices, and it feels both terrifying and exhilarating. So what happens now? David asks, his voice smaller than before. Now, we figure out whether you can love us without controlling us, whether you can support our choices even when they're not the choices you would make, and whether you can rebuild the trust you damaged with your lies. 3 months have passed since that Easter Sunday revelation, and the changes in my life have been nothing short of transformative. As I sit in my kitchen this morning, reviewing financial statements that I now understand completely, I'm struck by how different this room feels compared to the morning I received David's deceptive text. The same sunlight streams through the same windows, but everything else has changed, including me. The financial audit I conducted with James's help revealed both good news and concerning patterns. The good news is that Robert left me well provided for, with substantial life insurance, retirement accounts, and investments that have grown considerably over the past 3 years. The concerning news is that David had been making investment decisions without my knowledge, moving money between accounts, and in some cases making choices that benefited him more than me. Nothing criminal, as James suspected, but a pattern of paternalistic control that assumed I neither wanted nor needed to understand my own financial situation. David had convinced me to sign papers giving him broad authority to manage my investments, then used that authority to consolidate accounts in ways that made him the primary contact for financial institutions. I hadn't lost money, but I had lost autonomy, which in some ways felt like the greater violation. Working with a new financial advisor, a woman recommended by Patricia, who specializes in helping widows reclaim control of their finances, I've learned to read investment reports, understand market fluctuations, and make informed decisions about my money. More importantly, I've learned to trust my own judgment about risk tolerance and long-term goals. For the first time in my adult life, I know exactly how much money I have, where it's invested, and what my options are for the future. The process of financial independence has been surprisingly empowering. Each statement I review, each decision I make, each conversation with my advisor reinforces the reality that I'm capable of managing complexity and making sound choices. The woman Robert and David both assumed needed protection from financial stress turns out to be quite good at understanding market trends and planning for long-term security. Sarah and Marcus's wedding is scheduled for October, and my role as maid of honor has become a source of joy I never expected. We've spent weekends touring venues, tasting cakes, and planning a celebration that reflects their values of equality, creativity, and genuine partnership. Watching them make decisions together, really together, with equal input and mutual respect, has shown me what I missed in my own marriage and what David still doesn't understand about healthy relationships. Marcus has become not just a future son-in-law, but a friend whose perspective on art, design, and creative risk-taking has enriched my own thinking. Through him, I've started taking pottery classes at the local community college, something I mentioned wanting to do years ago but never pursued because Robert thought it was frivolous. My hands, which spent decades cooking meals and cleaning houses and managing other people's needs, are learning to shape clay into beautiful, imperfect objects that exist purely because I wanted to create them. The relationship with David has been the most challenging aspect of this transformation. Our confrontation that Easter evening was followed by weeks of silence, then tentative phone calls, then a series of difficult conversations about boundaries, respect, and the difference between caring and controlling. David has slowly begun to acknowledge that his behavior was manipulative, though he still struggles to understand why his intentions don't justify his method. We've started meeting for lunch every few weeks, conversations that are careful and somewhat formal, but gradually rebuilding trust. He's learning to ask about my financial decisions rather than making assumptions about what I need, and I'm learning to share information without automatically deferring to his opinions. The most significant breakthrough came last month when David called to apologize specifically for lying about the Easter brunch, not just for the misunderstanding or poor communication, but for deliberately deceiving me to prevent something he didn't want to happen. It was the first time he acknowledged that his behavior was motivated by his own preferences rather than my best interests. "I was wrong, Mom," he said during one of our lunch meetings. "I convinced myself I was protecting you and Sarah, but really I was trying to control outcomes because I was uncomfortable with changes I couldn't manage. I'm sorry for lying, and I'm sorry for making you doubt your own judgment. Now, it wasn't a complete transformation. David still has opinions about my choices, and he still sometimes slips into patronizing language, but it was progress toward a relationship based on respect rather than assumed authority. The extended family has rallied around the changes in ways that have surprised and delighted me. Patricia has become not just an aunt, but a mentor, teaching me about everything from investment strategies to international travel. We're planning a trip to Italy next spring, something I've always wanted to do but never felt brave enough to attempt alone. James and Claire have become regular dinner guests, bringing books to discuss and introducing me to their friends who are artists, teachers, and professionals building interesting lives without following traditional scripts. Through them, I've discovered a social circle of people my age who are exploring new interests, pursuing delayed dreams, and refusing to accept society's limitations on what widows and older women should want from life. The most unexpected change has been in my relationship with myself. For the first time since I was very young, I wake up thinking about what I want to do rather than what others need from me. I make plans based on my interests rather than my obligations. I've started saying no to activities that don't bring me joy and yes to opportunities that scare me in exciting ways. This morning, I received a text from Sarah. Mom, Marcus, and I were talking about honeymoon destinations, and we realized you've never been anywhere you really wanted to go. What's your dream trip? We want to help you plan it. The question stopped me in my tracks. For decades, my travel consisted of family vacations to places Robert chose, visits to relatives for holidays and obligations, and the occasional weekend trip built around other people's preferences. I've never actually considered where I would go if the choice were entirely my own, but as I sit here thinking about Sarah's question, images start forming in my mind. The lavender fields of Provence I've seen in magazines, the bookshops of Edinburgh I've read about in novels, the art museums of Amsterdam I've dreamed about since college, the cooking classes in Tuscany that Patricia mentioned during our Italy planning conversations. For the first time in my adult life, the world feels available to me, not as someone's wife or someone's mother, but as Margaret Thompson, a woman with her own interests, her own budget, and her own right to seek experiences that feed her soul rather than fulfill other people's expectations. The phone rings, interrupting my travel fantasies. It's David, calling for our weekly check-in. Hi, Mom, how are you doing? I'm doing wonderfully, I tell him. And for the first time in years, it's completely true. Sarah just asked me about dream travel destinations, and I'm realizing I have so many places I want to explore. That sounds exciting, he says, and I can hear him working to keep any trace of concern or management out of his voice. Have you given any thought to what kind of trip you'd want to take? Actually, I'm thinking about several trips. Patricia and I are planning Italy for next spring, but I'm also interested in France and Scotland and maybe even Japan. I want to see gardens and museums and try foods I've never tasted. There's a pause, and I can imagine David calculating costs and considering logistics and worry about me traveling independently. But when he speaks, his voice is careful and supportive. That sounds amazing, Mom. You've never really had the chance to travel for your own interests before. I think you should definitely pursue that. It's a small moment, but it represents the larger shift in our relationship. David offering support for my choices rather than alternatives to them. David trusting my judgment rather than trying to redirect my decisions. David learning to love me without limiting me. Thank you, sweetheart. That means a lot to me. Mom, can I ask you something? Of course. Are you happy? Really happy, not just okay or getting by, but actually happy with your life? The question touches something deep in my chest. It's the question Robert never asked. The question David is just learning to ask. The question I'm just learning to answer honestly. Yes, David. For the first time in longer than I can remember, I'm genuinely happy. I'm excited about my future. I'm proud of the choices I'm making, and I'm grateful for the people in my life who support those choices. I'm glad, Mom. You deserve to be happy. As we end our conversation, I return to my financial statements and travel research with a lightness I haven't felt in decades. The woman who received that Easter text message was living a borrowed life, accepting borrowed limitations and trusting borrowed judgment about her own capabilities. The woman planning trips to Provence and pottery classes and October wedding celebrations is living authentically for the first time. She's learned that love doesn't require surrender, that family doesn't require submission, and that starting over at 52 isn't starting too late. The Easter brunch that was supposed to be cancelled became the beginning of everything I didn't know I wanted. Sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as betrayals, and sometimes the people who try to limit us end up liberating us instead. If you're watching this story unfold in your own life, remember this: you are never too old to reclaim your power, never too late to choose authenticity over approval, and never wrong to insist that love should expand your world rather than shrink it. Your life is yours to live. Choose wisely, choose bravely, and choose for yourself.